Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Bisma Mirza. Welcome to Makawim Gaza Tales, the tale of perseverance. Today we'll be talking about healing in war zone and doctor's reflective surgical journey from Gaza to South California. I'm joined by Dr. Jawad A Khan, who went to Gaza from California in last year. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for joining us.
Absolutely.
Just a brief introduction. Dr. Jawad Khan, he came back from a life-changing surgical mission in one of the world's most devastated region. He has an impressive medical journey, undergrad at the University of Michigan, orthopedic training at Wayne State, and a hand surgery fellowship from Baylor College of Medicine. He has been in private practice since 2018. And he went there not as a surgeon, but as a Muslim, and it's deeply honored to stand with those who are suffering under siege. Dr. Saab, before I ask you some questions, there are some facts which I would like to share with the audience. According to the Palestinian authorities, since January 15, 61,709 people have been martyred, including children, and 11,588 have been injured in Gaza, according to Palestinian authorities. 905 have been martyred in West Bank, occupied West Bank, and 7,370 have been injured in occupied West Bank. According to United Nations report, at least almost 80% of commercial facilities have been damaged. Almost all of Gaza homes damaged or destroyed. Since January 15, we are talking about 2025, 88% schools, building, healthcare facilities, 50% of hospitals are partially functional, 68% of road networks, 68% of croplands have been damaged. All of this percentage of the devastation that has been taking place, has took place in Gaza. And Dr. Saab, amidst all of this, I mean, I'm sure figures might be 10 or 15% less when you went to Gaza. So you understand you were going to a war zone, right?
Absolutely.
With Muslim identity, despite you were a US national. But this was a war zone you were going, and you knew that, anything could be possible. You might not come back alive, but you still went there. So what were you thinking when you went there?
Well, to be honest, it's probably not the right way to think, but a lot of times, especially us, born in the United States, United States citizenship, we always kind of have this sense of, we're going to be safe. I've gone to the West Bank before, and and then with this trip to Gaza, you go there, you're kind of thinking, I'm a U.S. citizen, so nothing's going to happen to me, but when you get there, you start to realize, wow, no, this is very real. I'm definitely not as safe as I thought. But you know, even with that, I think as a physician, we were in a very special position because not many people are able to physically go to Gaza and do something.
Yes.
I remember Imam Umar Suleiman actually said this is the one time in his life he wishes he was a physician because we were actually able to go in and help. So it was kind of one of those things where, when the opportunity came across, there was no way I could say no to that. I feel like every Muslim in the world wishes they could go there and do something physically. So if I was given that opportunity and I were to pass up on it, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. But it's just one of those things. Like we all feel so helpless, and there's not much we can do. And I was given a chance to actually go do something. So I just told myself there was no way I was not gonna to take this opportunity.
Yes, I can understand. And, we're really honored to have you here because these are the few moments where you feel that, okay, so one of the reasons you're not a US or a Britain citizen and you cannot go to Jerusalem. When you went there before this genocide took place, what was Gaza like? Or I don't know if you went to West Bank or Gaza. I think you mentioned West Bank, right? So,
Yeah. I was in the West Bank, so that was a very different experience. It was not an active war zone. The things we were going there to do, I went there twice. I think one in 2017 and one in 2012 or 13. And when you go there for those, we were actually going there to do elective cases, so not trauma, not like war-torn injuries, things like that. mainly treating congenital issues with kids in their hands, things that the local surgeons didn't have the specialty to handle. So it's very, very different, you know. Um, we experienced the checkpoints. You know, I had to fly into Israel, got detained for a little bit. You know, when they found out my family was from Pakistan, they made me give them every phone number in my phone of someone who lived in Pakistan. So, you know, that was my first experience with them. You know, and but once you got into the West Bank, I didn't see any Israeli soldiers or anything like that. Um, but yeah, that we were living very, you know, we were staying very comfortably in a hotel in the West Bank. Um, and doing different types of surgeries, very, very different than what was happening when we went to Gaza.
Okay. And what was the, I mean, definitely if it was not a war zone at that time, you definitely might have gone out to eat somewhere, you might have interacted with the people.
Absolutely.
So what was that feeling? What was the situation at that time?
Back then in the West Bank, you mean?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, you know, inside Ramallah, it's you know, sometimes you can forget, you know, that you know, you're under Israeli occupation. You know, there are restaurants, there are cafes, there are foreigners there. Ramallah is actually a very nice city, and when I was there, I actually told myself, "Oh, I could live here," you know. But that's because I forgot exactly, you know, you know who's surrounding Ramallah and controlling everything.
Mm,
So
mm,
I had a very nice experience there. The people were very friendly, and very hospitable, very welcoming, and also just very appreciative of what we were doing coming there to help. But it was a much more, you know, calm, laid back experience, and that's just because, you know, they weren't in the middle of, you know, like an active genocide, you know. So
yeah. And when you went this time, what happened? What was how you were treated at at the airport, and when you landed, obviously in Israel. So what was
yeah, yeah. So this to go to Gaza actually back then,
yeah,
it's no longer the case, but Egypt was still controlling the Rafa crossing. So we flew into Egypt.
okay.
And you know, surprisingly and kind of sadly, you know, the Egyptians are in a lot of ways helping the Israelis with certain things. You know, we were fortunate enough to when we landed, they went through all of our stuff. A lot of the stuff was like they're like, you can't bring this in. Um, but you know, we talked to them. We just said, hey, this is for Gaza. Fortunately, someone within those employees was very sympathetic to the cause, and he let us through. But my friend, who's a vascular surgeon, also a Pakistani guy, they took away all of his surgical instruments, and they said we're going to keep this at the airport until you come back, but you can't take it to Gaza. And they knew he was going to Gaza, and they just didn't really care. Um, so you know that it was very sad to experience things like that. So you know
Egyptian
we were
authorities did that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, we got into Cairo and stayed there for a night. The next day, we drove to the Rafa Crossing. So, you know, multiple checkpoints on the way there. When we got to the crossing, kind of same thing, very like a security heavy zone. Um, and what's interesting is one of the people there was telling us that there were a lot of cameras in the ceilings, and they were like, those cameras are controlled by the Israelis, and the Egyptians let them have those there so they can help, you know, identify people who are coming in or prevent people from coming in. So again, just very it's kind of very sad to see how that they were actually, you know, helping the Israelis in that regard. Um, after crossing the Egyptian side, we get to the Palestinian side, and that's when things just got very friendly and very loving and very welcoming. You know, they were just so happy we were there to, you know, to help them, you know, in what was going on. Um, and soon as you walk through their little their building at the crossing, you see the I Love Gaza sign, and then from there on, you hear the drones for the entire you know, for the entire 2 weeks we were there, we heard the drones. It's just a nonstop 24 hours. But you know, it was beautiful because, you know, the second we walked in, you see the I Love Gaza sign. Um, and then, you know, to our left, we walk in, and there was just like a man there, just standing there reciting Quran. You know, he's just reciting Quran very loudly. You know, and that just kind of gave us a very quick glimpse into like who these people are, and that really set the tone for us for the trip.
Okay. So how was your day like? I mean, when you used to start your day, so you used to cross the Rafah crossing, then you enter Gaza.
Yeah, so the Rafa crossing was a one-time thing. We crossed in, And then at the border, we kind of decided where we were going to go inside of Gaza. So they gave us two options. One was European hospital, which was in Khan Yunis, but they said there was another hospital called Shuhada Al Aqsa, kind of a little bit more like central Gaza, right just south of the line that the Israelis were controlling. A little closer to everything, and they just said that one needed a little bit more help. They were more short-staffed, so half of our group went to European, and then me and a few others went to Shuhada Al Aqsa. And then you know it's kind of obviously there's a lot of chaos, and things are very unorganized, but they do their best. So our typical day was, in the morning there's basically surgeries, um, and then throughout the day people are coming to find you saying, hey, we have this consult, we'd like you to see this patient. um, and then basically just doing surgeries all day and just kind of seeing patients in between here and there. And then, we were there actually during Ramadan. We were there during the last 10 nights of Ramadan. So during the day we were working, and at night we were praying Taraweeh, and then, later praying Tahajjud. So we were busy all day, but just in different ways.
Yeah. So you used to go back at night to Cairo, or you used
No, no, no. We
okay.
stayed inside. Yeah, yeah. So we
Okay.
stayed inside. The first couple nights we stayed in one of the rooms in like that courtyard of the Shuhada Al Aqsa. And that courtyard is at where we stayed is actually that area that got bombed like a few weeks ago. And there was that terrifying video of that guy who was burning to death, still had the IV on him. That's the area we were staying in the first couple days. And that was just that was just crazy, because that area was just full of kids. When we were there, it was just full of kids there running around every day, playing. Then after a couple days, they moved us inside the hospital, and we basically were just staying in a room, like kind of amongst the patients. So yeah, we stayed basically on the hospital campus for the entire 2 weeks, um, because they said more for our safety. Don't leave anywhere, don't go off plan. The WHO was coordinating with the Israelis, so the Israelis knew where we were at all times. So they said if they know you're in the hospital is technically safe, so don't leave. Um, and we're all aware of the AI and facial recognition technology that the Israelis use. So they said you could actually endanger other people by going out to the market or going to a local masjid, because if they see a new face, you know, the Israelis can react to that and saying, oh, hey, this must be some resistance fighter or something like that. So you could potentially make places a target,
Yeah.
by going somewhere you're not supposed to be. But on the flip side, us being at the hospital, the Israelis know we're there. We actually are kind of like a safety net for them. So half the reason they want us there is because they know if there's American or Europeans in the hospital, it's not going to get attacked, or at least you would think it wouldn't get attacked. So you
Yeah.
know we also were kind of like a safety net inside the hospital.
Okay. And would you like to talk about the kind of injuries you dealt with, the surgeries you were performing, and
Yeah.
the conditions were there, and what kind of condition were there? Did you have equipment and the necessary tools?
Yeah, yeah. So, by training, I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and then I did my fellowship in hand surgery. So, when they say hand surgery, it's kind of, hand, wrist, elbow, like arm, that's kind of what falls under the category of hand. So that was the bulk of what I was seeing. I was definitely helping with other cases with like leg injuries, things like that, but more of kind of like an assistant. So, I was lucky in some sense in that, the patients I saw were the ones who were going to make it. My colleagues in the ER, they were seeing a lot more of the patients who were coming in and kind of dead on arrival, or dying within the ER. So everybody I was seeing were patients who were stable enough to undergo surgery. And to be honest, the majority of what we saw were, I would say about 75% of my patients were children, and there were a lot of gunshot wounds. So, and I always feel it's important to bring that up, because the Israelis kind of claim collateral damage very often, but these gunshot wounds to the arms, the legs, the head, those are very, very targeted. And these were children. So I very distinctly remember my first case. It was an 8-year-old girl, and my daughter was 8 when I went. It was her and her three sisters. They were playing outside in an Israeli like quadcopter shot all four of them. Unfortunately, one of the sisters did not survive. The other three, one of them had an injury to her arm. We were not able to save her arm. It was just like whatever caliber bullet they're using is just it's causing severe amounts of like soft tissue destruction. So we had to amputate her arm. And then her two sisters were shot in the leg. One of them had a fracture that was fixed. One of them actually had a vascular injury. And alhamdulillah, like our group brought a vascular surgeon, so he was able to reconstruct her artery and save her leg. But it was just a very clear targeting of children. Four kids all shot. And that was the bulk of what we were seeing. We were definitely seeing a lot of explosive injuries, things like that. But a lot of those patients were just not making it to me because they weren't surviving. In terms of the conditions and like the supplies, very very short on medical implants like plates and screws. So we had to be very very creative. It was a lot of pinning and X fixes. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the X fixes. It's basically where they put like the rods and stuff on the outside, so it's something they can take off. And those were utilized a lot because you can pass them on, and that's kind of what was happening. Is a patient would have a fracture, we put an external fixator on. They keep that on for a couple months, then they take it off, and then we'd use it on another patient because it was they just had nothing else to use. Aside from that, the conditions of the hospital itself, there's the Israelis have destroyed their sanitation infrastructure. So there's mosquitoes and flies everywhere, including in the operating room. So the infection rate was well over 50%. Half the patients who get surgery get infections, and it's very hard to manage because there's no post-operative care there. There's just so much chaos from the acute injuries. Patients who have had surgeries kind of just get lost to follow up, and they'll show up in the hospital a couple weeks, couple months later with an infection. And one of the hospitals that had two operating rooms and one procedure room, and one procedure room we had to utilize just to wash out infections all day. So you can imagine the burden on the healthcare system there. One surgeon basically his entire day was just washing out infections, cleaning out dirty wounds. So it's a big problem, and it's something you don't really see the statistics on that when it comes to what's happening in Gaza. You see that like this is the number of martyrs, this is the number of injured, but the infection rate is definitely a massive problem there, and they don't have the right antibiotics, they don't have proper follow-up, and they just don't have the time and resources to kind of follow these patients.
I see. And what about the anesthesia? We hear a lot of surgeries that have amputations and surgeries are taking place without anesthesia. Is that true?
That is true. Fortunately, we were there. When we were there, we had so kind of going back to when we went, the Egyptians were controlling the crossing. So, the one good thing is they had no restrictions on how many luggages we can bring in. So, me and my friend, we brought in like 9 or 10 luggages, one each for us, and then everything else is full of medical supplies. So our team brought a lot of anesthesia, and we bought ultrasounds so they could do blocks and things like that. But there definitely was a shortage of that. So if they could get without using it, like procedures in the ER, suturing someone's wound, things like that. Unfortunately, those patients got those procedures done without lidocaine, without anesthesia.
So you had to be
But
selective. Yeah, you had to be
you have to be
selective.
very selective, and it's a little easier for my surgeries because like I said, we brought these portable ultrasounds, so the anesthesiologist could actually do nerve blocks where they'll actually numb up the entire arm, and that would save on the anesthesia for my procedures. So the arm would be numb, so they wouldn't need to put them to sleep. So that was we brought a couple of those, and they told us that was probably one of the best gifts they've ever gotten because now they can save a lot in anesthesia because they could just numb up an arm or a leg. But you can imagine, there's just so many injuries going on that despite with that, we were there a year ago and there were shortages. I can't even imagine what things are like now. So yeah, they're definitely having to be very, very selective about how they use the anesthesia and the supplies.
Okay. And at that time when you went, Egypt was controlling Rafah crossing. So I don't know. I don't
Yes.
remember. Was there a ceasefire at that time for temporary ceasefire or no?
No, no, there was no ceasefire at that time. When we went, everything was pretty active. I mean, we were hearing explosions all day long. And you'd hear them, and then if it was close enough, you just kind of know, okay, there's going to be a mass casualty event. Our hospital's about to get flooded with some new patients. So yeah, when we went, there was everything was still very active. Um, and but I mean, you kind of saw even during the ceasefire, they were still bombing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the reality of it. But now that Israel controls the Rafah crossing, a lot of it's harder to get in, and when you do get in, they let you bring in one luggage. So the Israelis right now are requiring, if you go in right now, you're required to go in for 4 weeks. When I went, you could do 2 week trips. 4 weeks is very hard for someone like me with my work and things like that to do. And I think they do that on purpose. They make it 4 weeks because they know they're going to weed out a lot of people. And then with that 4 weeks, they're now only allowing in one luggage. So you can only bring in one luggage. So, imagine you're trying to pack for yourself for 4 weeks and you're just not going to have any room for supplies, or you're going to have to bring in some bunch of supplies and just know I'm not going to have anything for myself for a whole month. Um, so they're kind of purposely making things so things are even more, even less available in terms of supplies. And also back then, the Egyptians, they were restricting how much cash you brought in, but they weren't really checking. I mean, we took in a lot of money and we just we had to hide it. But now the Israelis are there and they're checking everything, and I think they're only allowing in up to like $2,000 American, which right now in Gaza, that's not going to last very long. um, some of the people I'm in touch with there, she's one woman who lives in the north. She sent me a picture of like 3 fish, and she said that cost her 270 American
Oh
dollars
my
just
God.
for 3 fish. So
Yeah.
imagine how much $2,000 is going to last out there. It's not going to last very long. And like I said, it's all by design. It's all on purpose. A few of the people I went with on the trip, they've tried to go back a second time, and they've all been denied at the border. Um, so I have a feeling if and when I try to go back, I'm probably going to get turned back at the border. Um, but that's just kind of what they're doing. So when we were going, we had a team of 7 or 8. Now maybe the teams are going in with 1 or 2 people who can
Yeah.
go in for 4 weeks.
Mhm.
So even the amount of help coming from the outside is very limited now.
Okay. So when you were there, you were all day long, all night long for 2 weeks.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. You were at the hospital, and all you could
Yes.
see were the casualties, the dead body, and you could hear the sound of the bombs being places being bombarded. And you, so basically, a person who is living in a trauma and a person coming from another place, he or she would actually be very, it's in a very conditioned environment. So you can't go out, and it's very rare occasions you have to go out. And now when they are saying that you can only 2 people can go, so you can imagine the
Yeah.
seclusion, and you can imagine the trauma, and you can imagine
Yeah.
how people perceive realities, where you're coming from, where you're going. It's death all around, and you're not very sure if this is your
ab-
hospital which is going to be bombed or not. Because I don't really
Absolutely.
think nowadays it's not about US or European citizen, because we know about Rachel Corrie, how she was
Yeah. Yeah.
by bulldozer. So have you been to any other war zones, or this was your?
No,
Okay.
this was the first one, and this actually came up because this the group I went with is Humanity Auxilium. It's actually run by a Pakistani woman in Canada. Um, and she's this auntie, but she goes to all these war zones all the time. She's gone to Myanmar and like Africa and things like that. um this was my first time. I actually reached out to them when the earthquake in Istanbul happened a couple years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
um and they were sending a team out there, but they were leaving within a couple days and I just couldn't make it work. So then she actually reached out to me in like January of 2024, and said she was sending a team to Gaza and they needed a hand surgeon. And I was just shocked that they were even able to get into Gaza because, like I mentioned, when I went to the West Bank, both times I wanted to go to Gaza and they just said, no way, it's impossible, won't happen. So, she had somehow coordinated with the WHO to be able to send a team in there. So like I said before, it's just that opportunity came across and there was no way, could turn something like that down, you know. So, but yeah, that was my first war zone, um, and inshallah, not my last.
Yeah.
You know, we're trying to see. I've been trying to go back to Palestine for months. It's just it's gotten so hard. So I'm keeping my options open. See if there's you know, a way. There was a time where we were possibly going to go to Lebanon when Lebanon was in
Yeah.
the middle of the war too. Um, and now we're looking into Yemen. So,
Yeah.
um,
Okay. Sudan is also a place you could definitely be on your checklist. Yeah. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, Doctor, Saab, when you went there and when you came back, what what were your thoughts like? I mean, how did you were you changed somewhere, or I mean, how did you started looking at things? What were your perception?
Yeah, you know, it was almost immediately where we started to feel the guilt, like the survivor's guilt,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, you know, we were sitting in the Egyptian airport, you know, in my group, I was, have you heard of Sheikh Haifa Yunus
Yes.
with the Jannah? Yeah, she was actually on my team that went, and you
Okay.
know, we were, yeah, it was very nice to be able to go with her, just having
Yeah.
her like
How about
her
that?
commentary and things like that, you know. So,
Yeah.
um, when we were leaving, we were sitting in the Egyptian airport, and there was a moment where we all kind of looked at like at our table, and we just had so much food on our table, and we were just like, man, subhanallah, like we just left, and look how we're eating already, you know. um like it's like we just realized how fortunate we were. And while I was sitting there, one of the guys, one of the young guys from Gaza was actually messaging me and texting and saying, hey, can you send me a picture of an airport? I've never seen an airport before. Or can you send me a picture of an airplane? I've never seen an airplane before. And I was just like, oh man, like subhanallah, like, you know, it's you can't, you don't even really like understand it until you hear it from these guys, because you know they've been trapped in there since they were kids, you know. um so you know, immediately we kind of realized, like, you know, like it's just you know, we felt bad, you know, we felt bad that you know, we just left a day ago and we're already like stuffing our faces, you know. um so it definitely changed our perspective on a lot of things. You know, I have 4 kids, and I realized that you know, living in Southern California, it's going to be very easy for them to get spoiled and things like that, you know. So I have to, there's some qualities in the children I saw in Gaza that I'm going to have to instill in my kids, you know, find a way to do it. Um, but it's, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, I still think about the patients I saw. I
Yeah.
still think about the people I worked with. You know, there's a lot of people I worked with as physicians that just, you know, haven't responded to my messages in a while. So I'm always worried about what's happening to them. Um, you know, there's a lot of people I'm in touch with every day. There's the sheikh that we prayed every night with for Tarawih and Tahajjud. I'm still in touch with him, and you know, just talking to him, I can feel and almost sense the change in desperation, that things have gotten significantly worse. You know, back then, you know, you'd ask them if they need anything, they would just say, Alhamdulillah, you know, like we're okay. Now it's just like, well, you know, if you could send something, please do. You know, we don't have anything right now. We haven't eaten in days. So things have gotten, you know, very desperate for them. Um, so yeah, it's definitely changed my perspective on life and just how I live and how I approach things, and you know how I you know, am with my kids, um, and just kind of like the direction I need to go with my life, you know. So I've been in private practice. Alhamdulillah, I've been doing well, but I've realized that, you know, I need to take off more time to do these type of things, um, because we can't just sit back and do nothing. And I think that's what a lot of people feel helpless, and in their helplessness, they're just kind of sitting back and doing nothing, and they're just kind of just posting on social media about how sad things are. But I really feel like we need to, you know, with how bad things are now, we're really getting to a point where people really, really need to start doing things, and doing things that are probably not comfortable, and that could risk your career and livelihood, because that's how bad things are in Gaza now, you know?
Dr. Jawad, how was aid coming in at that time? I mean, what was the supply line like? It was through crossing, Rafa crossing.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, that was probably the first thing we noticed is driving towards the Rafa crossing, is because even, you know, like before you got to Gaza, you kind of got a good sense of what was happening because you were driving there and you're still over an hour away, and there's just all these trucks lined up on the side of the road, and those are trucks just waiting to get in. Um, even back then, a year ago, the aid was coming in very sparsely, um, and some was getting in, but it was just getting in very slowly and not enough to meet the needs of the close to 2 million people in Gaza. Um, so I can only imagine what it's like now. Because now they're just saying we're not letting anything in. So back then it looked like they were letting nothing in, but they were letting in some trucks here and there. Um, so you can only imagine how much worse things have gotten now. But yeah, even back then, even then, it was very very visible because we were driving to Rafa Crossing. You're just driving through a desert, the Sinai Desert, to get to the crossing, and there's just miles and miles of trucks lined up just waiting to get inside Gaza with aid in them. And a lot of them have perishable items, so the things are spoiling and getting
Yeah.
rotten. And the other things like the tents and things like that, they don't let in because there's metal poles with the tents, and they're like, oh, they could use
Um,
this to make a weapon.
yeah.
So the situation was bad back then, and it's even worse now.
Yeah. So we do see videos of people in Gaza asking for help, donations, and we really don't know how to go about it, because as far as the news are pouring in, that hardly anything is going in, and crossing is that particularly Rafah crossing is not active anymore, and they're not letting the supplies in. So people are out of desperation, they don't know what to do. Either they share videos, they criticize the government,
Yeah,
for the inaction, and they're questioning how the aid is going to, if we donate, how the
that's
aid is going to go there. So
yeah, yeah. So, that's definitely tricky because there's a lot of organizations fundraising, and I kind of ask the same question. So, what I tell people is, if you aren't sure about the aid, at least donate to the organizations that are sending in surgeons and people. So you can still support that way. So, you know, Humanity Auxilium, Fudger Scientific, Rahma Worldwide. I physically saw them with the people there on the ground. They're sending in people, and they're still sending in teams. They're not as big teams as they were before, but like say for example, Rahma Worldwide, which is I feel like one of the better ones, along with Humanity Auxilium, they're sending in teams every 2 to 4 weeks. It
okay,
might be one surgeon, two surgeon, but
okay,
they're sending in people, and at least you're helping support like medical care because you're helping those people get to the inside. The other thing is that there are organizations like United Hands Relief. Um, that is an organization I saw on the ground, and that is one that actually works directly with the Jordanian government, and they have special permission to actually get supplies in.
okay.
So I know for a fact that they can actually get stuff in. So that one's United Hands Relief.
United
Um,
Hands Relief, okay.
yeah. Outside of that, I don't know. Like I think there's a lot of organizations that are still collecting donations, and unfortunately, their stuff is just sitting at the border. So it's hard for me to say don't donate to them, but I just can't like encourage it, because I'm trying to tell people to donate to the organizations I physically saw get on the ground.
Yeah,
Um, Aside from that, unless you know someone inside Gaza, I do still send money to people, but I have to send it to Turkey, and someone in Turkey sends it to Gaza. There's some way it works from Turkey to Gaza where they're actually able to get the money, but that is sending to people specifically. Um, which is still limited because they're scared. They don't want to accept too much because they're always worried what's going to happen. The account going to, I know people whose accounts got shut down because they kept sending money to Gaza. So it's definitely tricky and different, very, very difficult. But I would say just support the organizations that are there, that are there, like the ones I mentioned.
yeah, yeah, okay. um, You talked about the qualities of Palestinian children. You talk about the fair outside, people who are donating, they're being canceled out, talking about. So the fair, what is fair to the people of Gaza, to the children of Gaza? How are they tackling that fear? How are they daily living their lives?
It's when you're there, you'll still see kids being kids. So, like surprisingly, even when you're there, like, kids are playing, they're laughing. they'll always kind of find a way to still have fun and things like that. The adults, and that was something I left and that really kind of stuck with me, is just how resilient they were.
Mm.
And you know, you kind of ask them how they're doing, and everyone just says, like they're all just like, alhamdulillah, like Allah's on our side,
Mm.
um
Yeah.
and that's something you saw in like everyone there, and that's not to say that they're not hurting and they're not suffering, because they are, and they still need the help. But at the same time, I've never met a group of people that had such a strong like faith,
Mm.
um, that they all say like, we will win this war. We will win. Victory is promised by Allah. It's just a matter of time, and they just have patience. Um, they always just repeat, we are steadfast people, and like Allah is the best of planners. So, you know, sometimes I feel like we feel more helpless than they do, and that's just because like, they've been tested for years.
Mm.
Gaza, has been on, even before the war, they were on blockade for, since 2000, was 2006, 2007. Maybe it was even 2004, but they were cut off from the world for years, even before the war. And I think that actually helped them in some ways. They were cut off from the world, like their Muslim neighbors weren't helping them. They felt like they were alone. And I think that's when they really learned, like, okay, we can't rely on anybody here.
Mm.
We're surrounded by the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Syrians. No one is coming to help us. The only one we could turn to is Allah. And I think they really embodied that belief, and that's why they've been so resilient during this war now. Um, if they weren't under blockade, I don't know how things would have been. I think that blockade really strengthened them, and then made them rely on themselves and rely on God. So um, despite everything that's going on, the people there are still, they're still steadfast. Um, yeah, so it's just it's hard to describe, um, but despite everything they're going through, they still are very content, and have not, they have not turned their back on the religion or on Islam or Allah. They
Yeah.
still are very firm believers, and they know that victory is coming, inshallah.
Okay. Okay. So, do they have any resentment towards their Muslim neighbors and Muslim countries?
I'm sure there's some of that, and I mean, I don't even live there, and I have resentment to Muslim
Mhm.
countries, and um, it's like, with the Jordanians and Egyptians right there, like they're surrounded by their own people. And that's not the Jordanian people or the Egyptian people. I feel like if the borders are open, the people would flood in. Unfortunately, it's the governments.
It's
So, and I think they know it's the governments, but um, I think there is a little bit of a resentment that we're not doing enough. And I think they're right. I definitely think they're right, in that we're not doing enough. That whatever we can do, we need to do a little bit more. Um, I have a friend here who moved from Gaza. He actually was able to get out during the war. He got to California, about the actually he arrived in California around the time I went over there. Um, he's a neurosurgery resident. His name is Dr. Ahmed Abdin. Um, his program was destroyed, so he's here trying to get into to residency and everything. But he's dealing with a lot now. He was able to get out, but his family's still there. Uh, so he has a lot of regrets about leaving. Um, and
yeah,
also
yeah,
and also I think, and I don't blame him, like when he's here and he sees the Muslim community kind of living their lives normally, like nothing's going on,
yeah,
it really does hurt. It hurts him,
yeah,
and I completely understand that.
yeah,
I feel like, the Muslim world, every Jummah khutbah, we should be talking about this. Like, there should be nothing, and I wouldn't say just about this, because there's things going on in Sudan and other parts of the Muslim world, but like, this should be at the front of our minds at all times. That there's a genocide going on, and like our countries are not doing anything. So we have to just keep finding some way to do something, or put some pressure, or um, I just think we're getting towards, like, things are getting so bad there. It's getting very desperate. I think, if things are getting that desperate, we need to start getting desperate as well. And maybe, I mean, getting a little more political in some ways. It's just right now we're at a point where nothing's happening, nothing's changing. Like, there's billions of Muslims, and we have not been able to get like a drop of water into Gaza, and that just says a lot about the current state of the ummah. Um, so, whatever we're doing, we need to be doing like, yeah, at least double that, because we're not doing enough.
Mm. You talked about certain qualities of Palestinian people, especially children, which you would like to instill in your children. Would like to talk about that because the question about Gaza and people of Palestinian resilience, it has come up so many times. People want to know what
Yeah.
about resilience. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. I always remember that there's one time when we were at the hospital, we were walking in a courtyard, um, just kind of walking around at night. We were taking a little break, and this little, like, girl who couldn't have been even 2 years old was walking next to us, and she had a pacifier in her mouth, but she also was carrying a box of supplies. And I was like,
Mhm.
SubhanAllah, look, like, she was on a mission. She was going somewhere. She was doing something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, our 2-year-olds are watching, like, Miss Rachel, which I support, and they're just watching TV and playing on their iPads and things like that. So, obviously our kids are not living that life,
Yeah.
um, but there's definitely something about them growing up in this era of hardship. Um, and if you ever seen that quote, they say, like, hard times create strong men, and strong men create
Yes.
good, like, easy
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
And I think the people of Gaza really kind of embody that. Like, they've been going through these hard times, and it's created strong men and strong women and strong children. Um, when we were there, um, you know, we would talk to kids as much as we can, just to kind of make them happy. We brought little things for them, stickers, candy, stuff like that. But you ask the kids what you want to be when you grow up, and the answer was always like, I'm gonna be part of the resistance.
Oh,
And for me, I loved hearing that, because I'm just like, Allahu Akbar, like, these kids, like like I mean, they're like 4, 5, 6 years old, and they're saying that.
yeah.
But if I were to ask, like, kid over here, what do you want to be? They're gonna, say, like, I want to be an astronaut, or something like
Superman or
funny or silly like
something.
that.
Yeah.
But these kids are like, no, I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna like free my country and free my people. And I was like, SubhanAllah, like,
Wow.
how do we bring that back to our kids?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, obviously we live in a different region of the world, and things are very easy. So, I
Mm.
mean, I've been just purposely making things hard for them, like, in certain ways, like, and not like I'm being mean and beating them
Yeah,
up,
I
and, like,
understand.
raiding their room in the middle of the night, like the IDF or something like that. But I've just put them in activities, like, I've put them in stuff like wrestling.
Mm.
And I know that's nothing like what it is, but wrestling is very hard physically, it's very hard mentally, it's very challenging. They lose a lot, they cry, they want to give up. But I was like, you know what, our kids need something like this, that they need difficulty, they need adversity. So even though it's artificial, I have to find some type of adversity to introduce into their life, just so they know that things aren't easy. Things aren't like Southern California, or you can't just go to a beach every day and hang out and things like that. So, we learn a lot from those kids. So, there's a group of us who are here in Southern California. We've kind of made it our mission that we need to get to the community, and we need to start introducing things that bring some from artificial adversity into these kids' lives, because we want them to kind of, we want them to be physically tired. We want them to be overwhelmed a little bit. We even want them to cry. We want things to be difficult, and we want them to work through that difficulty, work through that adversity, and come out on top, because I think that teaches, that builds character, and just teaches them a lot about life. Obviously, it never be nothing anything compared to like what these kids are going there. But if our kids can be 10% of what they are there, I think we've won.
Yeah.
Um,
That
yeah,
is
because
brilliant.
those kids are like, they're like little adults. You sit there and you talk to them, and they're little adults. And I mean, one conversation I had with a girl, and I will never forget this, is, we actually asked her, like, she was 8 or 9. We asked her, like, do you have a message for, like, the Muslim world? And she said she paused and she said, tell them that this is their war too. We're just here on the front lines.
Oh
She's
my.
like, every Muslim needs to know that the war that's happening right now in Gaza is your war as well. Like, you need to take this personally. Like, these are your sisters, your daughters, your sons, your brothers, your uncles. They're being killed. We are fighting on the front line, but this is your war too. And I was like, subhanallah, like an 8-year-old just told me this, you know?
Wow.
And that's when I really realized that's how we need to start looking at this, you know? We can't look at this like, oh, this is Palestine, this is Gaza. I live here in America or I live in Pakistan.
Yeah.
That's a different issue.
Yeah.
This is our war, you know? And we have to start looking at it like that.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know where we have lost that values of that ummah, the
Absolutely.
humanitarian grounds. We have made it so distant and made it sound like, very emotional things which our children need to be distant from. We
Absolutely.
made it more like a politics, and our children need to be different and free from all these things. But this is actually
Yeah.
building of resilience. I know you have mentioned a lot of incident, but is there anything else which we have not talked about and you would like to share? Then I could go back to my questions.
You know, not necessarily about like, injuries and things like that, but I just love to mention to people that, we were there during Ramadan, so we were all fasting. Um, And when we were there, the first couple days we were just eating the protein bars we had, But after a couple days they actually started getting in some food, and we were trying not to eat anything because they had just finally started to get chicken and things like that, But these guys were like they just forced the food on us,
Oh my
and
God.
it, it was just like, man, like, you guys haven't eaten in weeks, proper food, and here you guys are making sure we're fed and we're hungry.
Yeah.
They would come check up on our rooms all the time to make sure we had enough water. And
Oh my.
just the fact that, we would be working during the day, and then at night we literally would be standing in prayer for like,
Mm.
6 hours, and that's what these guys did, every single day and every single night. So, it's just something you know, I uh, I really appreciated about them, and just that really stuck out about them,
Oh my God, Subhanallah, Subhanallah. When we
Yeah.
were young, and we had a lot of things on our iftar table, and we really minded if our mothers used to send something to the neighbors, something which we really liked it, okay? And here
Yeah.
kids, and they are
Yeah.
actually being so mindful about it when they are starving. Literally, they are on the
Yeah. So
starving.
mindful, and just, I don't know. I mean, we'd be praying tahajjud at like, 4 o'clock in the morning. And there would be like little kids who would stroll in and join us in prayer. And they weren't being forced there by their parents or their dads. They would just show up. And some of them would lead the prayers too. Because
Inshallah.
mashallah, I mean, oh, I can't tell you how many people we met there who were Quran Hafiz.
Oh
It feels like everyone there is memorized the Quran, Um, so yeah, it just speaks about who they are, and why Allah chose them to be there for this for
yeah.
this for this
Subhanallah.
war.
They're the beautiful people of the Ummah, and we are losing
Absolutely.
them. It's out of context, but did you get a chance to ask the Palestinian people how have they instilled, what they have done to instill these qualities in their children, especially about tahajjud and everything else? Um, no,
I don't even know if they like went out of their way to do this. Honestly, I
yeah,
just felt like it's such a natural thing to them.
yeah, yeah.
To them, like, memorizing Quran was like, oh, you didn't? Like, like it was almost like more strange if you weren't memorizing Quran. It's
Yeah.
just it's
No, the
it was
tahajjud, like you mentioned, but tahajjud, that's something, I would say kids
yeah,
find it difficult. So even having the
yeah.
concept of tahajjud for a kid, 2-year-old, 6-year-old, 8-year-old. So,
Yeah, I don't know what it was, and I didn't specifically ask about that, but when we were sleeping in the hospital, we were sleeping amongst the patients. So we had a little room off to the side, but we were sharing the same bathroom with like 100 people.
yeah.
Um, so when we were praying at night, almost anybody in the hospital could hear, because we were right next to patients and things like that. So I think a lot of it's the kids would hear it and they would just come in and join. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so.
Yeah,
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 that's just it.
yeah. Doctor, so a lot is being talked about boycott, and some people say it's not effective, some people say it's effective, and others say that it's the least we can do. What is your take on that? And a lot of questions came in about what can the conscious world do for the people of Palestine. What is your advice on that?
Yeah. You said by court? Is
Yeah,
that what you're saying?
boycotting
Yeah.
products. Yeah,
Oh, boycotting.
yeah, boycotting.
Okay, okay. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a big believer in the boycott, and I do think it's working. I definitely think it needs to be a little more directed. And I think that's something the BDS members have the BDS organizers have kind of been trying to hit, because I think people are boycotting almost everything. You
Yeah,
know, anything that has anything to do with Israel, they'll boycott it. But the issue with that is there is a burnout. You know,
yeah,
a lot of people get burnt out because there's just so many things on the list. So if you actually look at the BDS movement, they've picked like a handful of things and they say, let's focus on these.
okay.
And then once we were successful with these, we move on to the next one, you know? Um, I think that's the right way to do it. That's the least we can do. We definitely should not be buying anything that somehow financially supports the state of Israel. You know, it worked against South Africa, and I think it's working now. And I really think it's working because in the United States they're passing so many laws and things like that to try to stop people from boycotting, and that to me just shows that there's a fear there, and that it is working on some level. You know, the war is having an economic toll on Israel, and you know, even within Israel itself, they're having some like civil strife, which alhamdulillah, we welcome that, you know.
Yeah,
And I think if we can hit them even harder, like economically, um, that maybe we will, inshallah, in our lifetime we'll see the end of Israel, you know.
inshallah,
Um,
inshallah. Yeah,
but yeah, I don't think I would never like minimize the boycott. I definitely think that's something that's the least we can do. Is the least you can do is not buy like a Hewlett Packard computer, because they're supplying like computers and technologies to the IDF. It's little things like that we absolutely have to do. So yeah, I would never minimize that, and I think we should, if you can boycott multiple things and all things, and not feel like you're getting burnt out, alhamdulillah.
yeah,
But like I said, that can be hard to do. So I would just encourage everyone to actually go to the BDS website, because they have their official things of what they're saying. This is what we need to focus on right now.
yeah. Because people have become so much addictive, and there are hardly any alternatives, especially when it comes to technology. For instance, Google, you hardly have good search engines. But I think
Yeah,
we should make the intention and move in the right direction.
absolutely,
We have lived without it before, also, and we can live without it.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
There was a question I would like to ask you, which we received on Facebook. It's a bit political. I leave it up to you to answer it, but I'll just, for the sake of our viewer, I'll just ask the question and you can definitely answer it or not answer it. So what would you
Yeah.
advise for them to do in terms of a political action that can bring them closer to their freedom?
So it's tough to say because politically, things are difficult. I know in Pakistan, like it's protesting is not always like a safe thing to do. Um, and I don't know what kind of avenues you guys have like politically here in the United States. SubhanAllah, like a lot of these political activists are non-Muslim, and sometimes they even Jewish. And they're kind of at the forefront of the fight for the Palestinians. Um, so I think it's probably different in your context versus ours. Um,
So you
we
can
have.
ask, you can answer in a global context as well, because this is from a person who lives in Britain. So
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So, there's a lot of political battles being fought here in the United States when it comes to like rights and things like that. Like I'm sure you guys are hearing about these people being deported, their
yes,
visas being revoked,
yes,
So, I'm not I'm not a politician, or, I can't even say I understand politics, but the organizations who are like at the front of like the forefront of these battles, like the Council of American Islamic Relations, um, I'm a big time supporter of, and I'll support them financially. Um, but it's a tough thing because I think that it's hard. I feel like it's one of the things we could do the least for right now, but it's probably one of the more important things. Because when you look at it like politically, like say, look at the politics of Egypt and the politics of Jordan. The people in the country are extremely pro-Palestinian and are very hurt by what's going on, but
yes,
the government is doing nothing about it, and
yes,
actually like even silencing like protests.
yes,
But it's it's one of those things where I feel like it's hard for me to say, and I tell this when I go to all the colleges and talk to them about it. You know, there's a lot of college protests and things like that, and it's hard for me to say, oh, you should do this because I'm not the one putting my education things on the line. But at
Yes.
the same time, it's hard for me to not say to not encourage that because I can tell them and just I mean just by how the government and the university is reacting that it's having a strong impact.
Yeah.
Um, so you know whatever you can do, you know I'm not one of those guys who minimizes protests. Um, you know even if you go out there and protest and have 10 people, I mean you're doing something. You know you're doing something even if it's just for yourself. So it it's a difficult. I can't say I have a really good answer, but
I
I definitely
understand.
think,
Yes.
yeah, it's something that we have to use whatever political tool we have,
Yes.
even if they're minimal right now, and even if it's a little dangerous in some ways. You know, I know college students who've come to see me in my office for hand surgery because they were at a college protest for Palestine and they put the zip ties on their hands so tight that their hands have become
Oh my
numb and things
God.
like that, you know. So and these were non-Muslims, you know. So I
Yes.
was like,
Yes.
you know, if they can put their lives and their careers and educations at risk,
Yes.
like why aren't we, you know? And that includes myself, you know. I'm not I might not be putting my education at risk, but I could put my career at risk, and I think we're at that point where we have to because if you do, um, if you really trust in Allah and Allah's plan, like you know okay I know what I'm about to do might put my career at risk but I trust in Allah and you know I have to do something for the Palestinians and I think that's when you really show your true faith and I think that's what we're kind of lacking right now is people are just doing things that they're comfortable with and not kind of taking themselves out of that comfort zone and I think you know what man the Palestinians are going through a lot and they're really you know what they're going through, what we could possibly go through by protesting or things like that is nothing compared to what they're doing, and we need to start making those same type of sacrifices.
Do doctors have to go through therapy when they come back from such war zones?
You don't have to. There's a lot of organization and local masjids who are providing that, and some of the people I went with they went through therapy when they came back. Um, I didn't. Probably maybe I should. I don't know. But you know I didn't. Um, But yeah, I know a lot of some of the nurses I went with and some of the physicians I went with. They had to go and talk to somebody about what they saw and things like that. You know, so there's
Yes.
definitely a lot of that support out here, and it's available for us. You know.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Jawad, your message.
Message would basically be exactly what that 8 to 9 year old girl told me in Gaza. You know, I think we need to all start taking this very personally, and you know, really look at this as not some external conflict or some foreign distant conflict in a foreign land. Um, you know, no matter where you live in the world, these are our people. Um, these labels like Palestinian, Pakistani, you know, Syrian, these are man-made labels. um, you know, we're all Muslim. This is part of our ummah, and we need to start looking at things like that and realize that you know our Muslim brothers and sisters are slaughtered overseas, and you know we're the truth is we're not doing enough. Whatever we're doing, we need to do more, and I think we have to emulate the Palestinians in the sense that we have to have that true and like unshaken like faith in Allah and Allah's plan and put our full trust in him and know that we you know if the Palestinians are sacrificing you know we're probably going to have to make some sacrifices on our own when it comes to our jobs and our careers and our education because the people of Gaza really need our support and our help. So we have to do whatever we can, even if it kind of if we take ourselves out of our comfort zone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jawad, for your time. And I
Absolutely.
really appreciate it. I don't know what time is it in California. It's nighttime here, but
Yeah.
appreciate
It's
your
10
time.
a.m. here, so
Oh, okay, okay, 10 a.m.
yeah,
Not so
yeah,
bad, not so bad. So it's
yeah.
almost 10 p.m. here in Pakistan. I'm so glad. Thank you very much. Your experience and your journey actually have put things into perspective because we have been seeing this on our screens, and sometimes you become numb and you get involved in so much politics and segments, which is coming, the objections which are coming, the criticisms which are coming in. Like I told you about the aid, and recently a fatwa has been declared, has been given to do jihad, and people are talking about how can we go there? We can't fly there, and why don't ulamas do there? So you're being a doctor living in the United States, travel to Gaza. So your experience put things into perspective. Your this entire experience which you have been exposed to, put things into perspective and give a lot of perspective to people who are still debating about boycotting. And thank you for sharing that girl's message. We have
Absolutely.
been hearing that all our lives, but I don't know why things become so redundant, which are so important. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Jawad. Really appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Jazakallah. Thank you for having